In front of millions, Barron Trump sneered at Jasmine Crockett's skin and her humble roots. He was certain his arrogance would crush her, but her reply detonated like a bomb, exposing privilege against sacrifice in a single strike. The chamber erupted, cameras locked in, and the nation held its breath. So what devastating words did Jasmine unleash that shattered Barron in seconds? Stay with us. This is a story worth every second of your time. The chamber blazed with white-hot lights, every corner lined with cameras feeding live to millions. Reporters leaned forward, pens frozen midair, as if the whole nation was perched on the edge of a blade. The atmosphere was suffocating, charged like a storm about to break. Jasmine Crockett sat motionless, back straight, her face carved from stone, but her eyes sharp and unyielding. She was the calm center of chaos, the woman who had clawed her way from public defense to the halls of power. In those eyes burned a warning she was ready for war. Then Barron Trump strode in. The suit gleamed, the smirk cut across his face like a knife. He moved as though the chamber already belonged to him. In his mind, this wasn't debate. It was spectacle, his chance to humiliate Jasmine by reducing her bloodline to dust. This was no discussion of policy. This was a trial of honor. Barron snapped open his laptop with a flourish, the glow of the screen cutting through the chamber. A giant projection lit up behind him, gleaming skyscrapers stamped with the Trump name, wide shots of golf courses stretching to the horizon, hotel brands lined up like trophies. He raised his chin and smirked, letting the silence stretch before his voice struck. "Look at this," Barron declared, clicking to the next slide. "Trump Tower, Trump International, resorts from Miami to Dubai. My family built America with wealth and power. We didn't wait for handouts. We didn't beg for pity. We took this country and made it shine." He turned, eyes locking on Jasmine. "And the Crockett family, nobody knows who they are. They have no legacy, no name, no worth. A low-born bloodline cannot lead the nation." The words hung like smoke, seeping into every corner. Some Republican lawmakers chuckled under their breath. A few reporters allowed themselves tight grins, pens scratching fast as if headlines were already written. Barron clicked again, the next slide showing red and gold bar charts, tax maps glowing as though ordained. His tone sharp and cruel. "You know what built your life, Congresswoman," he pressed. "Not sweat, not work, not legacy. Welfare checks, government housing, social subsidies. You're not the product of hard work, you're the product of a system of charity, a child of handouts pretending to be a leader." The smirk widened as laughter rippled through a few rows. Cameras zoomed tighter on Jasmine, waiting for a crack, a stammer, some flicker of weakness. But she did not move. Her hands rested calmly on the table, her posture straight as steel. Slowly she raised her head, eyes blazing under the harsh white lights. When she spoke, her voice was low, steady and unshaken. "You want to measure worth in towers of glass and checks with your name on them?" Jasmine asked, her words sharp enough to cut. "You think skyscrapers prove honor, or that money equals sacrifice?" She leaned forward, not shouting, but letting every word slice through the silence. "Listen carefully, Mr. Trump. This country was not built on your hotels. It was not built on golf courses or casinos. It was built on blood, on sweat, on sacrifice. That is what raised America, not a trust fund." The chamber froze. Reporters paused mid-scribble. The laughter evaporated, even the cameras seemed to still. Barron's smirk faltered, his fingers tapping nervously against the laptop. Jasmine's eyes never left his. Her final words landed like a hammer. "So the next time you call someone's bloodline unworthy, remember your family built towers, but families like mine bled to keep this nation standing." A silence heavy as stone swallowed the room. Every eye stayed fixed on Jasmine, and every mind wondered the same thing: if she had spoken this boldly without proof in hand, what devastating evidence might she be holding back? Under the harsh lights, Jasmine leaned closer to the microphone, her voice steady but heavy with memory. "My father was a black soldier," she began, eyes sweeping the chamber, sent to Vietnam before he even turned 20. He carried a rifle, a picture of his mother and faith in a country that didn't always carry him back. He returned with shrapnel near his spine, a limp that hurt every time the rain came, and nightmares that tore him from sleep. The room shifted. Her words weren't performance, they were confession. She went on softer but sharper. I grew up watching him fight battles long after the war ended. No medals on the mantle, no bragging about victories. Just a man teaching his daughter to stand straight, to fight fair, to understand that freedom is never free. Every peaceful morning in America was bought by someone's blood. His blood. His friend's blood. That is my inheritance. That is my America. A few older lawmakers lowered their heads and nodded. Men who had worn the same uniform carried the same ghosts. Across the country, millions over 50 watched silent in their living rooms and veterans' halls, the smell of jungle rain and diesel fuel rushing back. They saw not a congresswoman talking, but a daughter lifting the weight of her father's sacrifice into the record. Then Barron leaned back in his chair and laughed, a sound thin and cold. "The past is just the past," he said, smirking as if the story had bored him. "The future belongs to those who control the economy. That is my family, not yours." The words cracked across the chamber like ice water, draining the warmth from the air. Every eye swung between him and Jasmine, waiting. Everyone knew she would not stop at a story. They braced for the counter-strike that was coming. Under the white heat of the lights, Jasmine rose slowly, every movement deliberate, the silence drawing tighter with each second. She placed her leather case on the table, unclasped the locks one by one, and let the metallic clicks echo through the chamber. Phones lifted, cameras whirred, and all eyes fixed on her hands. She reached inside and pulled out two thick files, one in each hand, paper edges sharp under the glare. The air in the room held as if waiting for the strike, the tension like the second before a thunderclap. She lifted the first file high. "This," she said, voice steady, "is my father's service record." The cover bore his name and serial number in block letters. Inside, the official stamp read, "United States Army. Induction date, March 12, 1968. Deployment, Republic of Vietnam, Quang Tri Province, July 3, 1969. Wounded in action, October 14, 1969. The medical note listed shrapnel embedded near his spine, permanent injury sustained in combat. The ink was faded but still legible, a silent witness to sacrifice. Jasmine's fingers lingered on the pages before she lowered it, her touch respectful, as though she were holding more than paper, she was holding the cost of freedom. Then she raised the second file, her gaze never leaving Barron. And this, she continued, her tone sharpened to a blade as Donald Trump's record. The Selective Service paperwork was clean, neatly typed, its language sterile. It read, classification date, October 15, 1968. Status, medical deferment, reason, bone spurs, calcaneal spurs, right foot. Attached was a letter dated November 1968, signed by Dr. Larry Bronstein of Queens, New York, certifying the diagnosis. A second note bore the name Dr. Manny Weinstein, reinforcing the exemption. Neat signatures, perfect margins, and escape, written not in courage but in cursive and ink. Jasmine stepped forward, her heels clicking like hammers against the floor. She reached the center table, lifted both files above her head, and slammed them down together with a crack that rang like a gavel striking judgment. Paper fanned and settled, the sound traveling through the chamber like a slap. She didn't raise her voice, but her words sliced the silence. "These are two bloodlines. One accepted bombs to defend the flag. One found a way to avoid." "Barron, you say my bloodline isn't clean? Then who truly has dirty hands for dodging duty?" For a beat, the room froze. Then chaos erupted. Reporters hammered their shutters until the noise sounded like gunfire. Producers barked into headsets for the tightest shot. Lenses punched in so close that sweat on Barron's forehead gleamed under the lights. A boom mic dipped low, trembling above his lip as he swallowed hard. He opened his mouth, closed it, then opened it again, but nothing came out. The counterstrike was too direct, too real, leaving no path to dodge, no words to spin. Across the dais, nameplates rattled from the echo. A flag by the door shifted in the air conditioning as if it too had heard its own story. A senior lawmaker cleared his throat and turned away. A junior aide stared at the floor as if searching for lines that did not exist. Barron's fingers whitened around the lectern. His eyes flicked to the monitors, where his reflection now stood beside the word exemption. He tried to force a smile, but it cracked at the corners, slid off his face, and left only the shine of sweat in the twitch of a jaw. The moment swallowed him whole, too blunt, to spin, too true to bury, and for the first time all night, utterly impossible to escape. The echo of the files still hung in the air when the chamber cracked with whispers. Lawmakers leaned toward one another, voices low but urgent, the sound spreading like a fuse. A few older senators dropped their eyes to the table, unwilling to meet the glare of the cameras. Others turned their gaze on Barron, cold and sharp, as if weighing whether to stand beside him or step away. The room felt unsteady, heavy, with the fallout of truth dropped like a bomb. Outside, the world moved just as fast. Breaking news banners scrolled across live feeds. Crockett slams father's service record against Trump draft deferment. On screens in diners, airports, and bars, the headline glowed red and jaws tightened as Americans watched the story unfold in real time. Producers clipped the footage for replay, and anchors whispered in earpieces that the clip was already history. Jasmine leaned forward, her voice softer now, but no less cutting. "I am not arguing for myself," she said, calm but firm. "I am speaking for millions of American families of every color who sacrificed for this nation." The chamber stilled, the words anchoring in the silence. Barron forced a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "My family has contributed to the economy," he said quickly. "We've created tens of thousands of jobs. That's how we serve America." The words landed flat, hollow against the weight of the record still on the table. The contrast was unbearable. And then Jasmine reached for something older than files or charts. She pulled out a thin, yellowed envelope, its corners frayed, its flap softened by decades. The chamber stilled as she slid out the folded paper and set a neatly pressed flag beside her triangle, tight, the kind given to families who had stood at gravesides and endured parades of folded hands. Her fingers trembled slightly as she held the letter under the lights. The stains across its creases were dark, some the color of sweat, some like blood that had dried a lifetime ago. She raised it high so the cameras could see the header and the seal. Department of the Army, Office of the Adjutant General, Washington, D.C., December 5, 1969. Her voice steadied, cutting into the silence. To Mrs. Evelyn Crockett. Be advised that Specialist 4th Class William H. Crockett, Unit 1st Cavalry Division, was wounded in action on October 14, 1969, Quang Tri Province, Republic of Vietnam. In recognition of his injuries sustained in combat, the Purple Heart is awarded. Her hands paused, then pressed on. Furthermore, she read, the hush tightening around her. Specialist Crockett's conduct under fire is commended. While wounded, he assisted in evacuating 3 fellow soldiers from hostile territory actions, reflecting credit upon himself and the United States Army. His courage and devotion to duty are in keeping with the highest traditions of military service. She lowered the page a fraction, her eyes locking on Barron. My father bled, but he did not fall. He carried those scars home, and he carried his brothers with him. The chamber was stone silent. In the front row, a retired Marine wiped his eyes, his chest rising with a long, uneven breath. A pair of gray-haired lawmakers lowered their heads as if reliving battles they had thought long buried. The cameras zoomed close, catching the fire in Jasmine's stare, the quiver in the letter, and the folded flag gleaming at her elbow. It wasn't just paper, it was a battlefield pressed into ink. Jasmine's voice rose, still calm, but sharp enough to cut steel. You say my bloodline is not clean. Bow your head before the blood that was shed to keep this flag flying. She touched the edge of the letter to the flag, the 2 symbols merging into one. The weight of her words filled every corner of the chamber, every microphone, every broadcast feed. Barron gripped the microphone in front of him, his knuckles whitening the steel stem, groaning under the pressure. Sweat gathered on his brow, slid down his temple. He tried to form words, his lips moving once, twice, but nothing came. The monitors showed his reflection frozen beside a single word in the chyron below exemption. The silence crowned her statement like a verdict. William H. Crockett's name rang louder than any tower or fortune, and Barron Trump had no answer. The silence after her final words felt like the air itself had frozen. Jasmine sat back down slowly, not slumping, not loosening, but planting herself with the steadiness of a soldier at post. Her back stayed straight, her shoulders square, her hands folded neatly on the table. She didn't need to raise her voice anymore. Her presence filled the chamber. The lights caught her eyes and made them shine hard and bright, the eyes of a woman who had carried insult and turned it into fire. A black woman who had been mocked for her name, her roots, her blood now sat as the living embodiment of truth. The room shifted around her, but she didn't move. Reporters who had come expecting a political scuffle were now staring at her as if they had stumbled into history. A camera operator muttered, "Stay on her," and the lens tightened on her face, catching the calm resolve carved there. Every broadcast feed cut to Jasmine in that moment, her posture unshaken, her gaze fixed. It was the image of endurance, proof that words meant to diminish her had only sharpened her edge. The chamber, once hostile, now felt like it belonged to her alone. Across from her, Barron was unraveling. His face had drained of color, the sheen of sweat glistening under the relentless lights. He shifted in his seat, eyes darting left-right, anywhere but toward the woman who had just gutted his argument. He searched for a friendly nod, a reassuring glance from his allies, but found only stiff shoulders and downturned eyes. Even those who had laughed at his jabs earlier sat silent, now unwilling to be seen offering him cover. The swagger he had carried in was gone, stripped away, leaving the awkward truth of a man exposed, not a leader, not a fighter, just the son of a name trying to live on borrowed power. The cameras didn't let him escape. One close-up framed the bead of sweat that traced from his hairline down to his collar. Another caught his fingers, gripping the edge of the lectern until they whitened. He opened his mouth once, as if to speak, but the words died before they reached his lips. In that instant, the nation saw him for what he was: arrogance hollowed by reality, a pretender caught without a shield. The chamber gave him no mercy. Silence pressed down like judgment, each second longer than the last. Then the final image of the hearing sealed the moment. A camera panned low across the witness table, the shot deliberate, cinematic. On the polished wood lay two files side by side, one worn, stamped and scarred with the record of a man who had bled for his country. The other, pristine in exemption, signed neatly by doctors. Sacrifice and avoidance. Truth and privilege set only inches apart, but worlds away in meaning. The shot froze there for the broadcast, a still frame that told the entire story without a single word. And in that image, America understood. The image of the two files lying side by side didn't just stay locked inside the hearing room, it exploded outward the moment the cameras caught it. Within minutes, the clip of Jasmine slamming the records onto the table was posted by reporters, carried live on networks, and replayed on loop. On television, anchors spoke over the footage with a tone usually reserved for breaking emergencies. "This is the moment," one anchor said, "that silenced a chamber and shocked the nation." The sound of the folders hitting the wood became a drumbeat, replayed again and again, each thud striking home harder than any speech could. On social media, the video spread like wildfire. People clipped the hearing into short reels, slowing down the second Jasmine raised the documents and brought them down with force. Captions scrolled across the screen. Two files, two choices, one truth. Others added text that simply read, "Service versus avoidance." The comments flooded beneath with users confessing tears or outrage, some admitting they had never cared about hearings until that moment. The views climbed past 1 million within hours, then 3, then 5, and by nightfall, the slam had become the single most watched moment of the political season. Then came the letters and testimonies from those who had worn the uniform. Veterans organizations drafted open statements that circulated online and in newspapers by the next morning. One letter read, "Congresswoman Crockett, thank you for reminding America of what sacrifice truly means. Too many of us carried wounds and memories, while others carried privilege. You spoke for the ones who bled and for the families who waited." That letter alone gathered tens of thousands of signatures from veterans across every branch of service. It was not a political message, it was a declaration of recognition. On cable networks, retired soldiers filled the panels. A Marine from the Gulf War, his voice gravelly leaned into the microphone and said, "She didn't speak for herself. She spoke for every soldier who ever wondered if their country remembered them." On another channel, an Army nurse from the Vietnam era held back tears as she described the folded flags she had handed to grieving families. "When Jasmine held up that letter, she held us all up with it," she said. "That was truth, not politics." Her words stopped the panel cold. Even the host sat in silence before whispering, "Thank you for your service." The narrative settled in the public's mind like iron. Justice was not in skyscrapers, fortunes, or family names passed down like heirlooms. Justice was in scars carried on bodies and letters written to mothers and flags, folded tight and handed over at gravesides. Jasmine's name might not have adorned towers, but it had been written into history the moment she laid those files before the world. The message was unmistakable. True leadership in America is not measured by bloodlines of wealth, but by the measure of sacrifice and dignity no money can buy. By nightfall, the broadcast moment had become a political earthquake. Newsrooms dropped the kid glove treatment and wrote in hard ink. National papers ran banners that read "arrogant, disrespectful to veterans" beneath photos of Barron sweating under the lights. Editorial boards that once hedged their language now called his performance a failure of character. He mocked sacrifice and hid behind wealth, one column said flatly. Local stations interviewed veterans outside VFW halls. Every clip ended the same way, with a shrug and a grim verdict: no respect. Donors called campaign offices to ask if he really said it, and the answer traveled faster than any spin. Inside his own party, the chill set in fast. Senior operatives spoke off the record about an unforced error that will haunt us, while junior aides scrubbed old posts and quietly canceled photo ops. A governor declined a joint rally, citing scheduling conflicts, and the invitation line simply went dark. Two veteran lawmakers issued a terse statement: "Service is sacred." The party's weekly talking points skipped his name entirely, a silence louder than a rebuke. Barron stared at the space where applause used to live and felt how wide it had become. Pollsters caught the slide in overnight tracking. Among voters, over 50 favorables plunged hardest in households with a service member. Focus groups used words like "petty entitled" and "doesn't get it." A strategist tried a rescue pitch about economic leadership, but the sound of those files slamming the wood cut through every message like a siren. The more he talked, the more the image of two folders, sacrifice and avoidance, spoke louder than him. You cannot out-argue a sound that feels like truth. Jasmine moved through the same storm with the steadiness of a lighthouse. Bookers from primetime shows queued for her statement and played the clip every hour. Hosts repeated her line on air: "It isn't only money that builds this country. America is built with blood, with sweat, with sacrifice," and the words landed with the weight of a pledge. Constituents from districts red and blue emailed and called, not to argue policy, but to say thank you. She did not gloat. She told the same story the same way, with the same steady tone. Even on conservative panels, the temperature dropped from combat to respect. One commentator said, "We disagree on almost everything, but on this she is right." Another added, "You stand up when a soldier's family speaks." A former Republican senator looked into the camera and said, "Honor is not partisan." The studio fell quiet, and the host let the silence do the work. Viewers could feel the line cross the aisle in real time. In state houses, resolutions appeared recognizing military families, echoing her testimony word for word. City councils held moments of silence for fallen service members, whose names rarely reach the news. A mayor in a factory town told a local station, "We can argue taxes tomorrow. Tonight we remember who carried the heaviest load." The clip played on the screen behind him as he spoke, the thud of the files rolling again like a drum. It was not a trend, it was a correction. The larger message hardened like steel cooling in open air. The sacrifice of black soldiers and of poor families cannot be hidden by privilege that dodges duty. It cannot be erased by towers, logos, or checks with famous names. It cannot be talked over by swagger or softened by a smile. The nation may forget for a season, but the cost always returns to the ledger. When it does, the numbers do not lie. Barron tried one more statement. "My family has contributed to the economy. We have created tens of thousands of jobs. That is how we serve America," he said, voice thin. The line fell flat in studio after studio. Anchors nodded and moved on. Compared to the paper on Jasmine's table, it sounded like air. He could not outrun the sentence that clung to him: arrogant and disrespectful to veterans. By week's end, the political map had shifted an inch. That may sound small, but in a tight season, it is an earthquake that keeps rumbling. Endorsements that were once automatic slid to pending review, and friendly surrogates stopped returning calls. Veterans groups invited Jasmine to speak at memorial events, and she accepted with the same measured tone: gratitude first, agenda later. Evening shows booked her across the dial because both sides were listening now. The image remained two files side by side, one earned in blood, one inked in exemption, and a country reminded which one deserves a salute. From the final image of the two files side by side, the country didn't exhale. It leaned in. In classrooms the next morning, civics teachers wheeled out projectors and cued the clip, asking students to watch not just the slam, but the silence that followed. What is evidence? One teacher asked chalk already on the board. What is honor? Another assigned a short essay, define service using examples from your own family. A veteran parent sat in on a fifth period discussion and told the room, sometimes the bravest thing a leader does is tell the truth with paper. The bell rang, but nobody moved right away. Districts added a new page to their civics units, duty, privilege, and public trust. Lesson plans paired the hearing transcript with letters home from wars, Supreme Court rulings on conscription, and interviews with military families. Students broke into groups to test arguments. Is wealth a form of national service or only power seeking a mirror? Guidance counselors invited veterans from local posts to speak, and a quiet sophomore in the back row asked, what did it feel like to come home? The veteran paused, then said heavy, until someone looked me in the eye and said they knew the cost. The room learned what a salute sounds like without a single command. Veterans organizations moved just as quickly. Emails went out with subject lines that read, Memorial Program Speaker Invitation, and Jasmine's staff found their inbox filling with dates. At a wreath laying in a city square, an honor guard folded the flag while a bell tolled, and Jasmine stepped to the microphone. A Marine from another era stood beside her, chest full of ribbons, and said into the wind, she spoke for us. On another day in a chapel washed with afternoon light, an Army nurse from the Vietnam years told a packed crowd. She remembered the names that most people forgot. Heads bowed and the echo lingered in the rafters. Across the country, the national argument took shape in places where voices carry morning radio shows, barber shops, factory lunchrooms, church basements, union halls. Callers said, I never thought a hearing could make me cry, and others answered, maybe it wasn't a hearing. Maybe it was a reckoning. Moderators framed the central question the way a civics teacher might, who deserves to lead, the one who enjoys privilege or the one who understands the cost of sacrifice? People told stories about fathers who limped, mothers who worked double shifts, brothers who came home quieter than they left. The debate was loud, but under it beat a steady drum any soldier would recognize. On Capitol Hill, the shock turned procedural. Notices went up for a supplemental hearing to examine privilege-based duty avoidance, the sterile phrase masking a raw nerve. Staff attorneys pulled selective service manuals and dug through archives for patterns, exemptions, and signatures that had traveled smooth paths during war years. Witness lists formed legal scholars, military ethicists, and families who could point to scars or folded flags. A committee chair said, we will consider policy changes that ensure fairness, carefully neutral. But the gravity was plain. No one missed the fact that the spark had been a stack of papers laid flat in the open. Inside one party, the distancing was quiet but unmistakable. Fundraisers that once promised a packed ballroom became postponed until further notice. A governor's office sent a 4-line statement, we honor military service. We will continue listening. Members who had clapped at Barron's swagger found other places to be, other microphones to hold. A consultant muttered, there are storms you ride and storms you step out of, and this one felt like the second kind. The message wasn't shouted, it was subtracted, leaving a silence shaped exactly like a broken alliance. Jasmine's calendar filled with invitations that had nothing to do with polls and everything to do with memory. At a memorial wall etched with names, she spoke plainly, we carry you with us. In a stadium dimmed for a remembrance night, she read a paragraph from a letter dated decades ago and let the words sit on the field like light. Families clutched photographs. Old soldiers stood ramrod straight without being asked. When the bugle sounded, she turned toward the flag and closed her eyes. Later, a mother pressed a small note into her palm that said, thank you for saying what my son cannot say anymore. The lesson did not need a spin room to survive. It traveled in the old way, mouth to ear, home to home. People began to say it out loud. Leadership isn't a deed of inheritance, a tower, or a checkbook. It's the simple arithmetic of truth plus courage plus sacrifice. Whatever your color or your bank account, you can't counterfeit those sums. They show up in the ledger of how you live. Jasmine repeated the same sentence on every channel that asked, a title is borrowed, a duty is owned. Viewers nodded alone in kitchens and garages and felt seen. Town councils and school boards followed the current. Resolutions recognized military families and asked for new plaques with more names, including those who had served in silence. A history museum opened a temporary exhibit called Letters and Flags, built around a reading room where anyone could sit with a scanned archive and listen to recorded voices from past wars. In a library, a debate club posted a flyer, Public Forum Privilege Duty, in the American Promise, and the moderator wrote on a whiteboard, "What does a nation owe to those who serve?" The conversation didn't cool. It clarified. People argued, but they argued from the same set of facts, the kind you can hold in your hand. The message that rose to the top was not a slogan. It was a compass. Strength in a leader isn't a pedigree, a last name, or the comfort money buys. It is the willingness to stand up in bright light and carry the weight that comes with telling the truth. It is the courage to take blows without folding and to place someone else's hurt above your own pride. It is the stubborn habit of serving a community that might never learn your name. That kind of power does not glitter. It endures. When the cameras returned to Jasmine one last time, the frame told the whole story without a word. She stood at a simple podium, a folded flag in her hands, the triangle neat and tight, the stars bright as if newly washed. The two files from the hearing were not on the table now, but their echo lived in the way she held the cloth, careful, reverent, unshakable. She looked out at a crowd that included uniforms and work boots and Sunday dresses and said, "We remember." Behind her, the flag above the stage stirred in a small breath of air. A country built on the backs of the unnamed stood a little straighter, reminded that its spine is made of service, not privilege. Thank you for watching until this moment and for standing with us on this journey for justice. Your support means everything. Like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss what's next. And we'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment below and let us know what moved you most in this story. Together, our voices make a difference.